We wouldn't have been able to take on all the endeavors that we were able to without NBT. The Abbey Group is a food service management company servicing New England and New York. We specialize in K-12 schools.
We currently serve over 50,000 meals a day, and we're really big on bringing our local food into the cafeterias.
I began working with the Abbey Group when they were struggling with their former bank to understand their business model. I was able to meet with the owners and their accountant and understand their structure better, which enabled us to meet their needs and help them grow.
During the pandemic, our whole country shut down. Businesses shut down, schools.
We had to completely pivot our business on a dime. It was still imperative that the students were fed.
I think the Abbey Group was able just to pivot and move in the direction they had to because we had NBT Bank there immediately for us.
We had the opportunity to bid, and we won Farmers to Families Food Box program that was sponsored by the USDA. We were able to pack boxes and have them delivered directly into people's cars.
And so it was our good relationship we had and understanding with the business that we were able to easily and quickly respond to their needs so that they could take advantage of these contracts and win the contract.
We grew in the pandemic from feeding children in the cafeteria to feeding their whole families in their homes and to helping the whole state of Vermont with their food insecurities.
Everyone benefited, the employees, the families, the local companies, the local farmers. This all came together in a wonderful circle of helping each other. And you can only do that when you have a bank like NBT.
It's great when a customer calls us up and tells us about a great win that they've been working on for a long time and we help them achieve that goal.
They're personable, their employees at NBT are amazing. They care, and that's what it's all about when you want to grow your business.
Whitney Johnson is the author of the just-released title Smart Growth, the CEO of the talent development company Disruption Advisors, and Inc. 5000 fastest-growing private company in America, is considered one of Thinker's 50's top 10 global business thinkers. Whitney, who has worked at Fortune 100 companies and as an award-winning equity analyst on Wall Street, co-founded the Disruptive Innovation Fund. Along with her recent publication of Smart Growth, she is a frequent contributor to the Harvard Business Review and MIT Sloan Management Review, as well as the bestsellers Build an A-Team, Disrupt Yourself, and Dare, Dream, Do. Thank you so much for being with us this morning, Whitney. I'm looking forward to the conversation we're about to have. And speaking of, let's begin with a conversation about the S-curve. Going all the way back to 1962, it's still pretty relevant today. What is your impression? Give us the rundown on the S-curve and share with us how it's evolved in the way that it has been applied.
Yeah, well, Clay, I'm very delighted to be with you this morning. And the S-curve, as you said, it was popularized back in the 60s, so over 60 years ago now. And it first came about because E.M. Rogers, who was a sociologist, he had seen in Iowa that there was this corn that was introduced. And he discovered that even though it was drought resistant, even though it was easier to harvest, it had a 20% higher yield, people were not quick to adopt the corn. And he was trying to figure out why aren't they adopting it? It took 5 years for just 10% of the farmers to decide that they were going to use this corn, which would have been very useful to them. But then he saw that after those first 10% were willing to adopt the corn, over the next 3 years, the penetration went from 10% to 40%. And so the discovery that he had was that a new idea, a new innovation is adopted along the shape of an S. And so it was a way to think about how do groups change over time. Now, for me, the big aha was we were using the S-curve at the Disruptive Innovation Fund that I co-founded with Clayton Christensen, the late Clayton Christensen at the Harvard Business School. And we were using it to figure out how quickly will an innovation be adopted. But then I had this insight, this aha, that we could also use the S curve to help us understand how individuals change, how we learn, and how we grow. And so every time you start something new, you start a new project, you start a new job, you start a new company, you're basically at the base of that S until a tipping point is reached, or the sweet spot of the curve. So the base is the launch point. The tipping point moves you into the sweet spot where things are fast. And then you move into mastery, where growth starts to slow down. So you've now got this model to think about what growth looks like. You have slow at the launch point, fast in the sweet spot, slow in mastery. And when you understand this simple, visual, and therefore useful model, you have a way to think about where you are in your growth and therefore what's next. Wow.
So where are you in the S curve right now?
Where am I? I think that's a trick question. So I am as you all are listening, you're probably thinking, oh yeah, so actually my life is a portfolio of S curves. And so I would say, as a business owner, the CEO of Disruption Advisors, I'm very much at the launch point of the S curve in terms of scaling our business. But there are lots of areas where I would say I'm in the sweet spot. I'm in the sweet spot as a coach. I'm in the sweet spot as a podcaster. I'm in the sweet spot as an author of books. But because I'm at the launch point of building and scaling a business, that allows me to be generally in the sweet spot of my career and of my life.
Wow. Wow. Well, smart growth is about growing your people to grow your company, which is, it's so important. But building and maintaining high performing teams is a challenge right now across corporate America, as I'm sure you can imagine. We've heard about the Great Resignation, but you have framed it as the Great Aspiration. Explain.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talk about the Great Resignation, and that implies that people are giving up. They are just saying, I can't do it anymore. I give up. And when I think about what's happened over the past couple of years, psychologists actually have a term to describe that when you go through a period of tremendous stress, like a pandemic, it's often followed by growth, a lot of growth. They call it post-traumatic growth. And during the pandemic, you and I have had these opportunities to reflect. We have been stretched. We have discovered that we have more capacity than we thought. We are more resilient than we thought. And so as we're coming out of this period of time, we're saying, I won't go back to what I was doing. I want more. I want a better life. And so as people are leaving their current jobs, they're not resigning from, they're aspiring to. I want more, I want better, and therefore the Great Aspiration. And oh, by the way, you can use the S curve of learning as a retention tool, because it allows you to say, where are you in your growth? And if you come work with me, I will help you grow. And if people are able to grow, they are going to stay and continue to grow with your company, as opposed to leave and grow somewhere else. So that's the aspiration.
It's interesting when someone is starting a company, or even at the other end of the spectrum, moving into some place of authority in a major company, the understanding the culture and really employing these tactics that you talked about take time. How do you keep a person from being intimidated by having to understand these things that you're talking about and still be efficient and functional in their capacity in leadership?
Yeah. It's a great question, Clay. And I think what I would say, part of the reason why the S curve is so valuable is because it is so simple. I mean, you and I just had this conversation and I introduced it to you. It took maybe 2 or 3 minutes. Mm-hmm. And what it becomes is this common language that allows you to start the conversation. So for example, if you have a brand new employee working for you, you can sit them down and say, hey, I want to show you the S curve of learning. I want to talk you through the experience that you're about to have. You're brand new. You don't know our culture. There's some training that you probably need to do. And so growth is going to be happening, but it's going to feel slow because you're figuring out all these new things. You've got to figure out who to work with, how to work with people. Your brain is making all these predictions. Your dopamine's dropping. So you're going to feel overwhelmed and discouraged. And what I want you to know is this is normal. When you go home from work and are feeling discouraged, this is normal. This is how you're supposed to feel. And then what's going to happen after you put in the effort is you're going to move into the sweet spot and you're going to say, I love coming to work. I am on fire. I feel like things are hard, but they're not too hard, and they're easy, but not too easy. You're going to feel exhilarated, like you're exactly where you're supposed to be. And then at some point, and though it doesn't feel like it will ever happen, you're going to reach the top of the curve. You're going to hit mastery. And what's going to happen there is you're going to start to get bored and you're going to need a challenge. And what I want you to do when that happens, and don't leave, I want you to come talk to me and say, hey, I need more dopamine. I need a challenge. I want to continue to work for you and at this company. So what can we do to help me keep climbing or jump to a new curve? So it's that simple, Clay. You have that conversation when someone first starts, and then you now have this common language to talk about their growth and development, which will over time turn into the growth and development of your team and your organization.
Well, let's lean in there. What is the risk for employees who reach the mastery phase of the S curve, and how do you get that spark going again?
Yeah. So what's happening when you're at in mastery is your brain has run this predictive model, and they're like, at the launch point, how do I get to the top of that S curve? And they were running all those predictions. At the launch point, they were incorrect. But in mastery, the model is now working. So they're saying, I figured it out. Ta-da. So what you can do is you say to yourself, they need more dopamine. How am I going to get them more dopamine? They're going to get dopamine by giving them a challenge. And so what does that challenge look like? The challenge may be that you have them jump to brand new S curves. For example, let me tell you a quick story. Patrick Bichette, he was formerly the CFO at Google. And when he first started there, he had been in operations before, he'd been a CFO. And so Eric Schmidt, who was a CEO at the time, said, well, I can hire you, Patrick, but you're going to be bored in about a year and a half. Basically, you're going to be at the top of the curve. That's going to be a problem because I want you to stay here longer than a year and a half. So every time you start to feel like you're bored, I want you to come to me and say, hey, top of the curve, I need something new. That's what he did. So he started out as just finance. Over time, he took over people. He took over all of operations. He took over Google Fiber, and he took over their nonprofit, because every 18 months when he got to the top of a curve, he had a new challenge. And so when you have people at the top of the curve, understand you've got latent innovative capacity. If you will give them a challenge, either a new assignment, have them do S-curve loops and bring other people along, their brains will re-engage. They'll start to get dopamine again. And so you will be able to potentially retain them if you catch it soon enough. So that's what they need. They need a challenge.
You know, and I'll ask this question kind of as a follow-up to that. And I think the answer is kind of obvious, but I would still like you to elaborate. I would imagine in the period of a person's career, they're going to reach that point often where they constantly have to reignite. And I'm assuming it's okay if you do, if you keep getting there and needing to reignite. And I just kind of want you to talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the things, Clay, is that my hope is as we finish up today and once people walk away from our conversation is they'll say, I now have a map of what growth looks like. And you, I suspect, and everybody who's listening will say, oh yeah, I can map my life. I can map my career as a series of S curves. And every time you left a job or took on a new role, it was probably because you were at the top of the curve and you needed something new to do. And so my goal is that once you have this map and you can map your life as a series of S curves, it starts to help you understand, oh, okay, it's not that I don't like this company and it's not that I don't like my boss. It's just that I'm at the top of a curve and I need something new to do. And it allows you to depersonalize it and have a conversation that ends up being very productive, that people want to grow. And so are you able to give them those opportunities to grow, ideally for you, but if not, somewhere else. And then you become the best boss they've ever had because you were invested in their growth, regardless of where it was.
You know, there are people who are unsure about what's next in their career. And you've talked about helping people set up a portfolio of experiments. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So whenever you are thinking about doing something new, you're thinking about jumping to a new S curve. There are according to disruption theory, when you're willing to play where no one else is playing, when you're willing to do something new, your odds of success go up from 6% to 36%. So they basically increase by 6 times. But that means that there's still a 64% chance that it is not the right S curve for you. And so one of the things that I strongly recommend people do is that when they are at the launch point of a new curve or considering jumping to a new curve, just as you would with a portfolio of investments, you don't take all of your money and put it in just to one stock. You take your money and you say, I'll buy a little bit of this stock and this stock and this stock and this stock. And then you watch it. And over time, if it looks like it has momentum, then you double down on that investment and you buy more. It's the same with your career. You can say, okay, let me try this. Let me try this other thing. Let me try this, this other opportunity. I'm going to make a little bit of an investment in it. And if it looks like it's interesting, I find myself engaged in it, I find that it's consistent with my identity, my purpose, I can actually get the resources that I can need to be successful here, then I'll stick with it. Otherwise, I'll jump to a new curve. But I know that even though I've jumped to a new curve, no S curve is ever wasted because there are always things that you can learn regardless of what curve you're on.
You've also said you can choose stocks to invest in based on their disruptive innovation.
Yeah.
What is that, and how may we as business leaders be disruptive innovators?
Yeah. So so disruptive innovation is a term coined by Clayton Christensen, and it's basically a silly little thing that takes over the world, like the telephone did to the telegraph, like the automobile did to the horse and buggy. More recently, we saw Netflix disrupt Blockbuster, and we're seeing Uber disrupt cabs. Well, that was the insight that we had. And when I co-founded the investment fund with Clayton, we would go long Netflix and short Blockbuster, for example. Well, the aha that I had, similar to with the S curve, because I like applying management theories to individuals, was that you could apply this to people, not just products and services, that you could disrupt yourself. The big difference with personal disruption is that you are Netflix and Blockbuster. You're the silly little thing and you take over the world. You're the David and the Goliath because you are disrupting you. And so when you think about this idea of personal disruption, what are you doing? At its simplest, you're stepping back from who you are today, how you do things today, to slingshot into who you can be tomorrow. And it's that willingness to, for example, today, I don't listen very well. Tomorrow, I'm going to listen better. I'm stepping back from who I am to slingshot into who I can be. And that willingness to listen, to hear what my people are saying. Hey, I think I'm in mastery. I need something new to do. A willingness to do that allows you to move up the curve as a leader, but it also allows you to create the space so that your people that work for you can move up their curves as well. And as they grow, your company grows.
So such a great answer. And this next area is one that so many of us have dealt with. Now, your book talks about saying no to yes and how servant leaders often overextend themselves. So how do you stay in the sweet spot there without overextending?
Yeah. So one of the things I would say, Clay, is that, oh, it's so fun. I just realized this. Like my mentor, Clayton Christensen, is your name Clayton or is it just Clay?
It is.
Oh!
Well, it's Clayton. That's right.
I love it. Clayton. Okay. All right. So one of the things that happens when you're at the launch point of the curve is that you need to say yes a lot. You need to say, yes, I'll try this. I'll try that. I'll try this other thing. But as you decide what you want to do in order to gain momentum, in order to accelerate into the sweet spot of your learning, you need to start saying no. And saying no is really hard for many of us to do. Sometimes it's hard to say no because it's like being a kid in the candy shop. There's so many opportunities. I want to say yes to all of them. Sometimes it's hard to say no because our identity is built on saying yes to people. The reason that we need to say no is that in order to maintain that momentum along the curve, think about this car that's going really fast. You have to focus. And so the ability to focus is what's going to allow you to complete that S curve. And so you want to focus by saying no, including to, and this is where every manager who's listening, You need to give the people who work for you permission to say no to you.
Oh.
Right?
I can almost feel people sitting back in their chairs when you said that.
Say no to you. So what can that look like? If you go to them and say, wow, you are in the sweet spot. You are so competent right now. You are a high performer. And you're like, can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Can you do this? Then they'll be like, yes, of course I can do all of that. And then you say to them, but what I want you to do is I want you to prioritize. I want you to come to me and say, hey, I know you said there are 10 things that would be nice for us to be doing, but here are the 4 things I think we should be doing. And I'd like to say no to all these other things. And I need to say no to you. And then you as a manager say, great, thank you for thinking so strategically. It's good to say no. And I need you to now focus on these things, say yes to these things and no to these things. Now, the other thing that I want to add in here, in order as a servant leader to continue to move up the curve, part of saying no, well, one of the reasons you need to say no is so that as you're climbing this mountain, you can rest. You need to be able to rest. You need to be able to take a break. You need to catch your breath. And there is a wonderful quote by Tiffany Shlain. She wrote a book called 24/6. And she makes the claim, what if we thought of rest as technology? Because the promise of technology is that it will make you more productive.
Yep.
And we now know from the research that rest makes you more productive.
Yes.
And so part of the ability to move up along that sweet spot into mastery along that curve is to be able to say no, have permission to say no to your boss, and say no to things that are distracting, and say no enough that you can rest, because rest is a technology. And that ability to say no will allow you to say yes when it matters most as a servant leader.
Well, let's lean in on this, Whitney, because for a lot of people listening, I'm telling you, I could intuit, I could feel people going, yeah, that's easier said than done. And I think for a lot of effective leaders, they likely do want feedback from their team members. I mean, I believe in honest feedback because that's the only way to get to the best possible solution.
Right.
But it is not easy when you think that your way is the best way and you have the title. You're in charge. So how do you cultivate that within yourself so that your team members don't kind of look at you and go, is that what they really want? Or is this a game or something here?
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts on that, Clay. And so the first is, there was a very interesting survey that just came out by Aegon Zender, which is a headhunting firm globally. And they surveyed 1,000 CEOs. And of those 1,000 CEOs, they asked them basically the question, do you need to transform yourself and your organization? 80% of them strongly agreed, 100% agreed, but 80% strongly agreed. Now, here's what's interesting. Prior to the pandemic, only 26% strongly agreed. So one of the gifts of the pandemic is that CEOs, business leaders now understand that in order to transform the organization, they also need to transform themselves. And so if you want your people to rest, you have to rest. If you want your people to take a day off a week, you have to take a day off a week. If you want your people to go on a vacation, you have to take a vacation. And there are some very simple things that you can do to make this easier. Maybe you, like me, will be working on a Saturday afternoon because you're choosing to. You're like, oh, I got to get these 5 things off my plate. I'm just going to send that email right now or send that Slack message right now because then it'll be off my plate. Well, it's off my plate, but I just now dropped a bomb on the person who works for me. So send the email, but delay so it hits their inbox on Monday morning, so that when you say to people, take the weekend off or take Sunday off, you really mean it, because there is nothing coming from you, nothing that will cause their cortisol to spike between now and Monday morning. So let me go back to what I said. If you want your people to rest, the fundamental unit of growth in any organization is the individual. You have to rest.
Wow, that was strong, and I'm sure people around the room, or if they're in their office watching, they're probably looking around to see if anyone heard you say that on the speaker there. So let's get into the millennial issue.
Mhm.
How do
Yeah.
you attract and retain the on-demand generation?
Yeah. It's an interesting question. I have a couple of thoughts. I think that one of the ways that let me start with retain and I'm going to go to attract. I think that one of the gifts that millennials have given to the workforce is that millennials want to change where and when and how we work. And I think that is a huge gift. And for which I'm very grateful. And the pandemic accelerated all of this. I mean, this has been coming for the last century as we've moved from this industrial technological age. It's been coming along, but the millennials pushed it and the pandemic just pushed us over the edge. And I think that is a huge gift. One of the challenges for us who are not millennials, who worked 80 hours a week, 90 hours a week, as millennials are saying, hey, I want to do it differently. Sometimes we get resentful. Well, that's not how we did it. I had to pay my dues, and so do you. So one of the ways that we can retain millennials is to not require them to pay their dues in the way that we did. If they can come to work and they can get the work done, and I'll come back to that in a second, where and when and how they do it, we should not care. This should not be about our ego. So that's part of the retention piece. Now, there are two other pieces to this. Just because the where and when and how doesn't matter, it doesn't mean that they're not accountable. And so sometimes we're like, well, they just want to do whatever they want to do. Well, no, you still can hold them accountable. There are things that they need to get done and want to get done. And by the way, most millennials are very used to many guardrails. Are you willing to do those, hold those guardrails and not be entitled yourself by requiring that they work within the bounds that you have all agreed on? So I'd say that's the first thing, is we ourselves need not to say, oh, well, they have to pay their dues. No, when, how, what, doesn't matter as long as they get the work done. We need to be willing to hold the guardrails, number two. And number three, they want to grow. And so this comes back to the S curve of learning. If you as a leader are able to say, hey, if you come work with me, I will give you the opportunity to grow. And they believe that there is growth upside. And then you have those guardrails. And again, when, where, and how, doesn't matter. Just get it done. Then you're going to be able to both recruit and retain. Can I tell a story?
Yes, please.
Okay, here's a story. So a woman by the name of Brittany Boyd, she played sports in college. She goes to work for the New Jersey Nets arena, so in guest services. She's very good at what she does. She's very talented, but she's kind of at the top of her S curve. Well, Scott O'Neill, who was formerly the president of the Sixers, the Philadelphia Sixers, was looking at her and he's like, I think she's at the top of her S curve, or at least she's pretty close. And I think she's going to be a superstar, not just in guest services, but in sports marketing. So he goes to her and he says, hey, do you want to come work for me? Well, he had a reputation for developing people. So she's like, okay, I'm going to leave. I'm going to leave the New Jersey Nets arena and I'm going to go to the Prudential Arena with the Sixers. So true to his word, she did have to start at the top of her curve in guest services. Sometimes you have to do that when you change jobs, doing in master what you already know how to do. But he shortly gave her an opportunity to move into business operations. And even truer to his word, within a few years, he made her the chief marketing officer. And some people were like, whoa, well, she doesn't know how to do marketing. And then he said, but does it matter? Because what she does know how to do is she knows how to hire great people and she knows how to build a team. And if she can do both of those things, she'll be just fine as a chief marketing officer. She's a millennial. This is a perfect example. Give them an opportunity to grow, give them, rules that they need to follow, and then help them grow. And you will both recruit and retain people.
Well, let me lean into that just a little bit because I think you're absolutely right. We talk so much about the things about millennials that may frustrate us, but I think the list of things about them that make them efficient is longer. For instance, the ability to multitask and to integrate technology in their lives, into their lives in a way that gives them more time for leisure or whatever, and they still get the work done. So there's some positives there. And I think I really want people to hear what you just said in the crux of that story. He recognized her talent and knew that that talent would be able to thrive in other places. How does a CEO cultivate that eye to be able to see, well, yeah, they work over here and they're really killing it. I want to move them over there, but I'm worried that the two areas won't translate.
Yeah. Well, I think there are a couple of things. So part of this is this idea of spotting momentum. And I come from a background as a stock picker. And so I think about where is their momentum? And so if you spot a person who is really able to learn, so a person who can move up those S curves of learning, you put them in a situation that's unexpected and they're able to figure it out, to get their footing quickly, learn what they need to learn, move into that sweet spot quickly. You now know that they've got a skill set that allows them to build momentum. So it actually doesn't matter where they are. And at some level, it doesn't even matter that they know how to do, they have the domain expertise that they need, as long as they know how to build a team and help other people move up their S curves. And so what I would say is, number one, you want to look for people who know how to build their own momentum, which is a willingness to take initiative. People ask me oftentimes, well, what do you want young college grads to know? And my answer is, I want them to know how to take initiative and take initiative and take initiative and take initiative. Because if you know how to do those things, you're going to be able to gain traction. And the second thing that I would say that you want to look for is, do they give credit to other people? And do they know how to play on a team? And so you can ask them questions like, hey, how did you get to where you are? And if it's me, that might be a problem. If it's like, hey, I did this and this person helped me and I learned this from that and I collaborated with this person, all of those things are going to contribute to your knowing, not only do they take initiative, but I know that they can collaborate and they're going to get up that mountain and they're not going to say, hey, I got up that mountain, but oh, Ted back down there is dead. No. We all made it up the mountain together. So initiative, the ability to learn, to move up an S curve, and then willingness to collaborate and work as a team. Look for those three things.
Well, there's so much value and protein in your answers to these, because in what you're saying with someone who's coming up the mountain and they've been helped, it says that others have seen in them value and decided to help them achieve. Ooh. I think that's a great reflection, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, I love that, Clay. I wasn't thinking of it that way. You flipped it on its head. I was thinking of it, do I say, hey, Clayton helped me and Bob Proctor helped me and Marshall Goldsmith helped me? Am I crediting people? But I love what you just said, which is, if I can point to people that helped me, that means that there are people who want to help me.
That's right.
I love that. That is so good. And you know what's so interesting about that is that you will find, I know that earlier in my career, I said, people aren't really mentoring me. And I realize now, super embarrassing to admit, but older and wiser, I probably wasn't mentorable. Like, if you're not getting mentored, it might be that you're not mentorable, because people like to mentor people that they feel like are going to make them look good. So how are you going to make other people look good? That's the question.
Well, if you reference it in the next book, at least you already know how to spell my first name.
Yes, exactly, I do.
So what do you see as the future of work?
It will continue. We will continue to work. I don't mean to be glib. I see that as the future, a couple of things. Number one is that we are, as I've alluded to already, we are going to continue to innovate around where we work and when we work and how we work. Hybrid work is here to stay. And I think these are all really good things. Right now, over the past 2 years, it's been a bit complicated for us because the boundaries have blurred between our work life and our personal life, and we haven't quite figured out how to do that. But over the long term, I think this is very positive because it means that we're not compartmentalizing our lives quite in the same way that we had. And so our personal life and our work life, they're going to come together, and there's going to be this sense we're going to be more holistic. So the future of work is, I think we're going to continue to work very hard. I think many of us are going to continue to love our work. I hope more of us will love our work. I think the hybrid work piece is here to stay. And I believe strongly that the pandemic tipped what was already happening, is that people want to bring their dreams to work. And so go ahead.
No. Go ahead. Finish your thought.
Well, we want to bring our dreams to work. And if we know we can grow at work, then we get to bring our dreams to work. And if we make it possible for people to dream for a living, we will be able to recruit and retain every single day, every single second of every single day.
Imagine being able to cultivate that, again, the word cultivate that, in your team, where the person over a certain division or area of the company is getting to live out their dream in a capacity that helps your business. There is so much value in that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we spend so much of our time at work. And so when we can go to work and just say, I love my work, I love it, because you feel the sense of autonomy. This is the sweet spot, right? It's self-determination theory. You feel autonomy, you feel related to what you're doing, you feel related to the people that you're working with, you feel a sense of competence. I mean, who doesn't want that? We all want that. The very first thing I say in the book is growth is our default setting. If we can go to work and grow, we're happy, we're productive. And if we're happy at work, guess what? We're happy at home.
I'm telling you what, if this conversation doesn't fire you up, it just can't happen. I mean, because you got me fired up over here. Tim's nodding his head at every answer. So your book, Smart Growth, is full of stories, and you use them in your teaching techniques. Tell me about you, some stories of success that helped you in your own career journey and that have been inspirational to you and helped you create momentum.
Yeah. So, one story, it's not so much it's kind of a story, but early in my career, when I first started working on Wall Street, you're going to laugh. I'm going to tell you a fictional one, then a real one. So when I first started working on Wall Street and I was working as a secretary, I had majored in music and just now starting, and I've got these bullpens and stockbrokers. I mean, like it's the 80s. And I watched Working Girl, the film. And that really inspired me because I was like, I'm her. I even had big hair. I can be her. I can become an executive. So that really inspired me. On a more serious, it's true, but on a more serious note, I remember reading a book called The Female Advantage by Sally Helgeson. And she talked about how she highlighted Frances Hesselbein, who was the CEO of the Girl Scouts, how there were different ways of women working, that all I had in my mental model was, here's how a man would do it. And when I was able to start seeing how women would do it, and there were certain things that were innate and stylistically different, that unlocked things for me of recognizing, oh, okay, I now understand why this isn't working, because it works for a man, but it doesn't work for a woman. But I also understand that there are things that I am doing as a woman that will work for me that may not work for a man. And so that was very inspiring. One other, more recently, Bob Proctor, who just passed away, I mentioned him a few minutes ago. Here's a man who was basically Tony Robbins before Tony Robbins. He was in his 80s. But I met him a few years ago and he dropped out of high school. He was 14, barely literate. And through the power of his mind and disrupting his mindset and understanding that what you believe can become reality, changed his life, became a multi-millionaire, but also empowering so many other people. Over the past couple of years, he has really helped me further disrupt my mindset and believe even more is possible than I thought was possible 5 years ago. And so that has, his story and how he thinks about the world has been very inspirational.
Wow. I mean, I could talk to you for another 90 minutes, but unfortunately we got to reach the end at some point. So I'll end with this question. What are the top 3 takeaways you hope readers and our audience get from Smart Growth?
All right. Takeaway number 1. I hope that every single person, as they read this, believes more than they believe today that growth is our default setting and human growth is unbounded. The more we grow, the more we can grow. So that's number one. Number two, I hope that people will walk away from this book and say, okay, I'm ready to grow, but I'm not sure how. Now I have a map, and the S-curve of learning is my map. It will help me understand where I was, where I am, and where I want to go. I've got this simple visual model to help myself, help the people I work with grow faster. And the third thing that I hope that people will take away is to understand how you can use it in a very practical way. It decodes, it helps demystify personal growth. It decodes talent development, recruiting, and retention. And it also helps you think about, if I can grow my people, I can grow my organization. And so you can use it and manage your organization as a portfolio of curves and use it to help optimize your team for innovation. So those are the three things. Growth is our default setting. Use the S-curve of learning as your map, and then you can use it to demystify personal growth and decode talent development and help your organization innovate.
Whitney, you have been amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to talk with us this morning. Your insights into smart growth and how critical it is to grow our people, to grow our companies is, it's incomparable. And I'm sure everybody enjoyed everything you had to say. Again, her just released book is Smart Growth. I'd like to thank all of you for being with us, our guests. And Whitney, it's been just absolutely amazing to talk with you over this last few minutes. And man, just a delight. The energy, the insight, everything.
Clay, thank you for having me.
And thank our sponsors for making this episode possible. We'll see you next month.